What's funny, to get into AI, you heard me? With the World Economic Forum. Y'all just hold on. Let's tap on in. You heard me?
Different,
All right, give me one.
but they do have different
Yep,
cultural orientations,
here we
different
go.
priorities, different
Uh,
focus. Tell me who you think at this early stage
let's
is
get
getting it most right, most wrong, and why?
Yeah, it's a great question. And this ties to the issue of trust, right? Because the most meaningful way to have trust is actually to bake in rules of the road and protections that people can know and rely on. The European are moving forward with the AI Act. Of course, legislation is going to be the most comprehensive and the most baked. They can regulate private sector behavior. In the US, so far, the Biden administration is being cabined just to the powers of the executive branch. So they can issue guidance to enforce existing laws, but they're not adding on new legal obligations. That's going to have to come through Congress acting. But all of those conversations are hugely important. When you think about it from a trust perspective, right? What is it that got us comfortable driving on the roads at high speed? It doesn't work just for one car manufacturer to say, we have best
Yep.
practices, here's what we do. You need all of them to have rules of the road, to have basic protections that you can trust on, and for there to be a surrounding ecosystem of traffic lanes and stoplights that we all know and understand so that that ecosystem can function together well. So as I view this, we're going to have a combination of legislation that protects people's rights, that bakes in some of the fundamentals. And then because legislation moves slowly, and when you write it, it has to be evergreen, so you have some vagueness that needs to be filled in. We also need companies rising to the moment to fill in the gaps through multi-stakeholder agreements. So if you'll indulge me, I'll talk for just a minute about what that can look like. Crucially, on the regulation front, there's some basic rules of the road that would go a long way to helping make sure that these tools are deployed responsibly. We can think about data privacy rules, right? What are the inputs that are being gathered? How do we make sure that these tools are responsibly processing and gathering information? We can think about, in the US, we use the language civil rights protections. Globally, we might use human rights as the language. But what are the basic rules around how and when these tools can be used? And what is the access to remedy to people who are unfairly harmed by these tools? We can think about basic transparency norms. David talked about the really important work that OpenAI has been doing with system cards, pioneering what it is to be transparent. That shouldn't be a voluntary commitment by a company trying to do the right thing. That should be table stakes for every company to be doing, and for us to have agreed upon norms around what transparency meaningfully looks like, so that people know and there's some type of common language that's being used by different companies that also works in different jurisdictions around the world. Then, of course, we can talk about sector-specific regulation for, the long-term safety risks, nuclear capabilities. There are different things that different verticals might want to address as well. So that's one key area that we can have meaningful progress, and the European AI Act is starting that, and the US legislative conversations are carrying it forward too. Government use that I was alluding to before is another one. But let me quickly, before you take the mic back, talk about what that private sector involvement has to look like too. And I think that's particularly important in a space like the World Economic Forum, where we have people thinking around what are the types of commitments we can make as a multi-stakeholder body. So we had the voluntary commitments that a number of companies made to the White House. We've had similar efforts in Europe to think about what that might look like. The G7 has a code of conduct that they've put out, and the UN now has this advisory board. So a lot of different places where people are trying to define what good looks like. That is a really meaningful breakthrough. It gives me hope about this year. It gives me hope about the AI conversation. But there's a fundamental flaw in how this is working right now. Right now, companies are meeting with governments. They are thinking through what is the suite of commitments we can pledge to undertake. Then they are writing them together and they are releasing them onto the world. It's a really good first step. That's not how you achieve meaningful accountability in the long term, right? Multi-stakeholder bodies are multi-stakeholder for a reason. You need to have civil society and external third parties in those conversations as well, helping to build out the scaffolding of what responsible development and deployment looks like. You need deadlines and timelines. You need accountability measures for how those companies are going to report their progress on what it is that they're promising to do. And it works much better when there are outside groups that can help participate in that conversation. I think a key thing to know is that this isn't our first rodeo, right? This isn't the first time that the economy has thought about how to deal with breakthrough technology. And we can learn a lot from the fights over the social media wars and the scholarship that has come around what the field of trust and safety looks like and what meaningful multi-stakeholder governance looks like too. And there we have bodies that have sprung up. They should be more empowered, but have been sprung up to say, okay, if your company is going to do this, what is the policy? How did you develop it? Did you develop it with civil society and outside impacted communities at the table? How are you enforcing it? And are you transparent in how you enforce it? Do people have visibility into what you're doing to help make that accountable? You also have things like commitment to do human rights due diligence before you move into a new region. There are bodies like the Global Network Initiative, where it's companies and civil society together helping the companies stay accountable to their promises and then being audited from the outside. So I surface this again just because the legislative conversations are really important, but we know that legislating is hard and sometimes very slow, spoken as an American civil society advocate. We know legislation can be slow. These multi-stakeholder efforts are really important too, and we have
It's
to
gonna
think about how to
take years
weave
to
these
get this
together to
right.
make them
You know what
meaningful
I'm
and
saying?
for people.
Thank you. I agree that we
Because
need to
this
look at where
powerful
we've done this
technology,
before. Of course, when I think about
giving
governance around
everybody
social media, I'm
information,
not enormously
you
hopeful
know, putting it
in
in a
what that's going to look like
database,
for AI. Now, as a
man,
political scientist, I'll take my little narrow lens for a second.
is going
I see the
to let
disinformation issue getting
so
worse.
much
I
data
see it getting
that
worse,
it's going to
driven by
become a
AI.
powerful
I
supercomputer.
feel it around the Middle East war. And I certainly see it in terms of the coming U.S. election
And
for 2024. And
the
of all of the
future is
things that the U.S. executive order
which
addresses,
world
that is
power
not near
behind
term.
Russia,
So, given that,
Israel,
what do you
the
think
United States
can be done,
going to
both
be
broadly
able to
speaking,
explode
and then, so
that
specifically
supercomputer?
applications like watermarks, for example? I mean, like, is it okay if everyone has a different one, or do we need an actual single standard for how that works? I'm interested in those sorts of things.
You know, so this is something we're all, from the top on down, from Sam on down, we're all thinking a lot about elections. Actually, we just had a full-time person just begin to build a team and a program around that a year out of the U.S. Elections that are upcoming. And of course, there are many elections around the world that are upcoming.
And see, dealing
And we
with
know
AI,
that, you know, bad actors will use the least constrained tools
it's
that
the
are available. So
election
no matter what we put in our
season.
usage policies, we also know, and
A
we also, of course, we also open
lot
source
of
some of our
things can
things,
come in
but
play
open source things that
dealing
don't have
with
usage
election
policies are going to make a
and
lot of
AI.
powerful capability available to disinformation actors. That's clearly part of what's happening. I think there's been a really interesting shift in the watermarking conversation. So this is like encryption to know that this image came, for example, from OpenAI. And we actually, in the voluntary commitments, the wording on this was very careful. We said the thing we need is for people to end up knowing when
There's
they're
going to be a
looking
lot
at
of fake
a
media
you know AI output versus something that's
sending out images.
from some
A
other
lot of
more
things going to
traditional
be
source
going
like a
out.
camera. And there are different ways that you can do
That's
that.
why
We
they
can
got
mark our
watermark
stuff. We're looking at ways of doing
certain
that. We can have
images to let you know
classifiers.
if
So
it's authentic or
give
not.
it a copy of something and it says, well, did this come from us or not? We're doing that too. But one big shift in the EO was it talked about provenance and authenticity, not just for the generated stuff, but for the real stuff. So for example, what can BBC or other news outlets do to sign a photograph and say, we are vouching that this is a real photograph? And I think if your personal forecast here, marking the real is going to be the key that unlocks this, because we know, even if, and we will mark all of our stuff, or we will have classifiers, we'll have provenance controls around all of OpenAI's audiovisual outputs. We've committed to that. But we know there are going to be also lots of other models and lots of other generated stuff, and not all of it is going to be marked. And so I think in the end, what we really need is we need a way of knowing what there's a human vouching for and saying.
Single standard for that, do
You
you
know
think?
if it's verified.
Not necessarily. I think there can be different contexts where the vouching happens, but you know, it's also not just a matter of the standard of how the stuff gets marked or organized. As you said, the social media piece is the distribution. And so if I'm browsing, you know, on Facebook or Twitter or whatever I'm supposed to call it now, they need to be paying attention to these signals, and they need to create a user experience where the end user doesn't have to be a crypto nerd in order to know, okay, what's the right stamp on it? And so we see this not as something where like AI companies or news agencies are going to solve this on their own. It's a multi-stakeholder problem.
Just a second, that I
quick
think
one,
what David's saying is so important and really right. So OpenAI has been very thoughtful in terms of their usage policies on this and all of the rules. But to David's point, what we really need is actually how to boost the trusted information in the online environment. And that is not a new problem. That is something that many advocates in the space have been saying for a long time. So just to give one very specific example, because we promised we'd try and be tangible on this panel, my organization did a survey of election officials across the United States and found that only 1 in 4 election officials uses a .gov web domain. a lot of them are using things like, springfieldvotes.com, and that's where all of their election information goes. Really easy to spoof. And that is just basic web hygiene, right? What website are you bothering to create? So there's simple ways, the content authenticity signaling is another one where we can boost the trusted voices to put out that important public information. And it's why we need an ecosystem-wide approach.
So before we close, one big question for at least Lan, but maybe more broadly as well if we have time to do it, which is in 10 years' time, AI continues to explode. Do you think principally human beings on the planet will be interacting in one global digital space together, in two separate fragmented global digital spaces, or in many, many that are not particularly overlapping? What do you think is most likely?
Most likely is one fragmented and system. Well, I think of the complexity of the AI governance. I think in the international global governance regime, we have something we concept called the regime complex, meaning that there are many different kind of regimes governing the same issue. But unfortunately, this regimes doesn't have any sort of like a hierarchical relationship. They they all have some relevance to some pieces of it. But I think that that's the situation we are in. I think this is AI governance. We have many different institutions, many organizations, many regimes that's really trying to play together. Unless I think that the U.S. and China can find a way to compromise, to get together, to work with other institutions and with the UN, I think then we might address that problem.
That is a key question, and we're out of time, but a really good one to end on. Please join me in thanking an excellent panel.
Doesn't have any sort of like a hierarchical relationship. They're all
All right, man. Just wanted to get that in with y'all and let you pretty much know that we got a important future ahead of us, and dealing with this artificial intelligence, you got to really understand that it's the younger generation that's going to have a lot of hands-on with this type of technology. See, we in the beginning stages of AI. Imagine 10 years from now, AI be a normal thing, but also if you're not prepared mentally for it going forward, you're going to be lost in the sauce. So from me to you, stay tuned in, stay tapped in right here on Fire Knowledge Research, where I'm going to keep giving you daily updates dealing with artificial intelligence, ChatGPT, Anthropic, Midjourney, DALL-E. I'm going to give you some rundowns, a lot of research, because that's what we do here at Fire Knowledge Research. We research the facts and we give it to you. We give you clips live when we run across it, especially like the World Economic Forum, the investment initiatives. So we're going to give you right on financial literacy, computer science, history, and keep you up to date with books, and just let you get a whiff of what we present. I appreciate the support. I like to give a lot of little clips of motivation. I got a lot of clips on cars as well. And you know, on a daily basis, man, I just try to give you a well-rounded insight on good information. So from me to you, your boy, your host, Arthur Chill Fetty, the links in the bio. We got the gear on Teespring, and we're gonna have new merchandise coming as well. Also, help support the channel as well, as we can keep pushing, get some good advertisement out there. You know me, I love the fans, I love the support. I answer back to the comments. Keep your head up, and hey, stay focused, because you got to. And also, do your due diligence. Look into the AI thing. Go ahead, check you some stocks that deal with AI too as well, because you know that's future growth. But you want to find the stocks that got value. Microsoft deals with AI. Apple deals with AI. So Tesla deals with AI. You know what I'm saying? Nvidia deals with AI. These are big time corporations that you want to check into, and also do your research on. Peace, love, happiness, for real, on the Most High. You already know what it is. And to the next one, for real.